Hi, welcome to the first ever Rainbow Space Magic Con. This is the religion and I'm not sure what we're calling it. So without further ado, let's get down and introduce our panelists. Say your name and look briefly about your religious experience, I guess. Let's start with Harry.
Hi everyone, my name is Harry F. Ray. I'm really glad to be here. This is my first convention, so I'm super excited to get right into it. It's been a fascinating day already. I'm the author of the Galactic Captains Queer Space Opera series, as well as a bunch of different other books, which aren't all sci-fi, but they're all very much rainbow. About my background, I was raised with a lot of religion, and it's influenced all of my books, in particular my queer space opera series that I did a reading from earlier on. My mum is Jewish, and my brother and sister are ultra Orthodox Jews. My dad is Catholic. I was raised with both. I went to synagogue on a Saturday. I went to mass on a Sunday. I come from Glasgow in Scotland, where there's a very strong Catholic Protestant divide, and religion is very much a part of everyone's daily life. I later actually moved to Israel, where I became very interested in Jewish mysticism and Kabbalah. And I was actually studying in a yeshiva when I met my husband, dropped out, got married, and started writing. And here I am, and whoever's next.
Let's go with Olivia.
Colleen, and I write wonderfully dark age fantasy, including like super religiously involved Snowmancer and the Damon Snow series. And my experience of religion is, well, I didn't grow up in organized religion. Like I went to church once when I was a kid because I begged my mom. I'm like, can we go to church? Can we go to church? And I went to church. And like I was 7 and it was boring at the time. So for some reason, we never went back. But I've always been interested in religion. When I was a teen, I got into Wicca and paganism. In university, I did a degree in religion and culture. And now as an adult, especially because like I deal with a lot of like mood disorders and like my undiagnosed chronic illness, like I'm relying really heavily on religions, Buddhism and yogic philosophy.
Great. Rory?
Hi, I'm Rory niCoileain, and religiously I'm reminded of that Johnny Cash song, I'm from everywhere. I was born and raised Lutheran, became a pagan when I moved out of the house because I knew better about everything. I was 20. Stayed in that church till the early, or not church, stayed in that faith till my early 30s, became Russian Orthodox, and moved from there to my current home in the Episcopal Church, where I am studying to be a spiritual director, and I'm a member of the Order of Julian of Norwich, which is an Episcopalian monastic order. I am not a nun myself. I'm what's called an associate member, living in the world and doing my best to live by the rule of the order and studying Julian a lot, which is just a really wonderful thing.
That's great. I guess it's me next. I'm Lynn, and I have a very widespread religious background. My father was Catholic, but when he divorced, of course, that was the end of that. He was very anti-religious. My mother was Southern Baptist. When I was 13, I started going to Methodist church with a bunch of my friends, became a Methodist. In my early 20s, I left organized religion, and in my late 20s, married my husband, his father was Jewish, his mother was Lutheran. They had both left both of their religions because they married. That was back in the 50s. They then went to Buddhism. So my husband was sort of Buddhist, but really didn't do anything. And we did not live a organized religion life, and my children are heathens. So I have a very wide range, but I'm going to say I'm predominantly, my background is Catholic because I was born and raised in New Orleans in the 50s and 60s, and that means you're Catholic, whether you know it or not, which I didn't know till I was, in my teens. So let's go. I think, Harry, did you want to start that conversation off about how you're putting religion into your characters? Why?
Sure. I think it's a really interesting element to where the last or one of the panels earlier on today about where do we create the LGBTQ character arcs from, and I find myself drawn to those religious stories that I think we probably all heard, if not every week, every day. Growing up, there's so many elements to these religious stories from all different traditions. So I find myself drawn very much to those stories to find inspiration, and sometimes to try and do a queer retelling of a certain story. My new novel, actually, Alter Tides, which is the fifth in my space opera series, is essentially a queer science fiction retelling of the Book of Joshua. So if whoever can cycle back into their Sunday school memories, in the Book of Joshua, the Israelites sweep into the land of Canaan and take over the land. So in this book, in this story that hopefully will be coming out with 9 Star Press later this year, there's two worlds that are orbiting each other, and they can't meet. They don't, they're two separate planets, but they're connected by an atmospheric bridge once every 40 years. And the people from the sea world are going to sweep into the people from the dry world and cause a whole lot of problems. And I really drew that directly from being in a yeshiva, which is like a Jewish how you call it, a Jewish place to learn about Judaism. And I remember studying the book of Joshua, and the kind of story just started forming in my head. This was 7 or 8 years ago now, but from then it's kind of always stuck in me. I also actually take a lot of inspiration in my writing from reading about queer gods, which I've found that there are a ton of, and I've lately got very interested in the queer stories of classical Greece and Rome. There's so many fascinating things I've been researching recently. The cult of Antinous, if anyone has ever heard of that. Antinous was the lover of the Emperor Hadrian, and after this boy Antinous died, he was made a god by the Roman Senate, and all these temples and statues cropped up all around the Roman Empire, I think for quite a while. Celebrating this young gay guy who was, having off with the Roman emperor, and to me that's really fascinating. So I really find there's so much in kind of religion in general that I think a lot of us can kind of draw on.
So how, I'll ask this of all our panelists, how does everybody decide what or how much religion to put into your characters and your books? Olivia?
Actually, a lot of my books are like firmly based on religion, in that like it's such an important part of the world and the character that like literally I'm working on a book where like I'm changing part of the religion and in like doing kind of a rewrite fan fiction type thing, and like it completely changes like the characters and the character arc and what happens. So yeah, it kind of, yeah.
Rory?
I have a couple of different situations going on in my writing. I just finished a 9-book series, The Soul Shares, which is my urban fantasy series. And it's gay romance, which means one of the things it means is it follows a fairly typical convention of introducing a new couple in every book. And actually one of them is a threesome. So I ended up with a total of 17 main characters in this 9-book story arc. And I made a decision pretty early on that when I put religion into a fantasy book, or a fantasy writing of any kind, gods are generally expected to do something. They aren't just there for decoration. They are there to be active personalities, move plot along, and it can be really hard to rein them in sometimes because, how do you tell a god no? Unless they're just basically superpowered humans, in which case I already had 17 that I was trying to juggle and keep track of. So I made a decision fairly early on in the series that Faye did not believe in gods. They had no religion. And it was a decision made purely for expediency, but it's led me some very interesting places in the writing of the books. And now I'm going to have to go back and do a prequel and explain why they don't have gods, which is going to take me into science fiction and all kinds of fun stuff. But in Wolf Becoming, which you can see behind me, that's a novella that I published fairly early on in my career, and it actually grew out of a panel very much like this one. We were discussing, it was on Easter Sunday in 2014, and we were discussing religion in queer fiction. And immediately after leaving the panel, I was talking with someone at Dream Spinner, and they said, we're putting together an anthology of Christmas stories involving winter holidays. And it just all fell together for me. Wolf Becoming originally started out as a Russian Christmas story. It is also the only Christmas story I know of to open with an attempted fratricide. But the Orthodox Church is heavily involved in that because it's a different kind of fantasy. And one of the things that prompted me writing it was the extreme anti-gay stance being taken by the Russian Orthodox Church. I was thinking, I had in mind very much a friend of mine who lost his partner about 10 years ago. He lives in New York, and they're both originally from Russia. And he can't go back to visit his partner's grave. They had him buried in Moscow, and he doesn't dare. So I felt very strongly about that and wrote very strongly about that.
Well, for me, like I said, I grew up in New Orleans, South Louisiana. Catholicism is very strong. So I have two series that are werewolf shifter. One is in Bayou Country and one is in Central Louisiana. And in both of those, the werewolves are all Catholic. They go to Catholic church. It is part of, you can't separate being Cajun or South Louisiana from being Catholic. You just can't. And so it made sense to me to make my werewolves Catholic. And not only that, but they work very closely with the Catholic Church. They, in my Bayou series, they run a yearly festival of the Rougarou where they raise money. It's a typical Cajun festival, dancing, music, and they raise money for the church and for the programs, social programs. They also raise money for first responders in their city and parish, because most of the werewolves are kind of adrenaline junkies and they all gravitate to being police, fire, EMTs, that kind of thing. And so for them, it's just part of their daily lives. But I've also and it also is in those Bayou books very much, and the priests know that they are werewolves, but it's very much in their lives, and in those books, it's handled with a little bit more of humor than probably some people might like. But there's also something weird that happens in New Orleans and South Louisiana, which sort of blends Catholicism and voodoo. And it's something that you only kind of experience when you live there. And so one of the mothers of the main character is kind of a Catholic voodoo mama kind of person. She does these prayers with religious candles and stuff, and she thinks she has more power than she maybe really does, but maybe she doesn't. So I do that. But then I've also, in other books where I have like alternate universe books, I've actually created religions and kind of taking the best of what I would like the perfect religion would be, which is very personal and very don't do this, don't do that. You just have this personal relationship with God. In another set of books, one of the characters goes to renew his relationship with his grandmother, and she wants him to go to church. He's outwardly gay, I mean, just completely flaming gay. He's from Atlanta, and his whole idea of church is hell, damnation, and being queer is wrong. And he goes to this church that's out in this little country town and is amazed to find how open and receptive they are. That whole story revolved around when do you play God and when do you not? And it's about someone who has the power to heal. And his grandmother is dying and he's sent to heal her. And so the whole idea there is taking that concept of, if you can be a God, when do you and when do you not? So I like taking those kind of ideas and kind of twisting them around a little bit. It's about halfway through. Who's our question person?
And we do have some Q&As. Yeah.
Yeah, let's hit a few of these questions.
So the first one is from Scott. Have you ever had any blowback for including positive portrayals of religion in a story with queer characters?
I've never had anybody say anything about the characters and the religion that's in my books. I've never had anything good or bad. Anybody else?
I've never had any blowback. I forgot, by the way, I can't believe I forgot this. My characters are yelling at me in my head. One of my Fae books, the human character, token human character, he's actually a Fae. He didn't know it. He's a changeling. But he was, when he was brought over from the Fae realm, he was deposited in the north of Ireland with a Catholic family. And he is very Catholic, and he confuses the heck out of the other Fae. They're like, what in the world?
Rory?
Yes.
I mean, let's see, Harry. I want to make sure we've got a bunch of questions. So I want to make sure everybody. So Harry, what about you?
I've never received any blowback, I don't think. I wouldn't mind though. I wouldn't mind to have any reviews in my mind are good for me, good or bad. So if someone was pissed off by something, I would be fine with it. There's I think there's an awful lot of stuff inside religion that people often think is they don't really maybe know about or appreciate so much within their own traditions, because when you're raised with a very heterocentric view of things, or you're told this is the only way it is, then you automatically, I think, feel excluded. And I just seeing also some of these questions here about, I want to maybe touch on this one a little bit now as well, but someone asking about people being traumatized by religious groups or practices, and I think that is true of, I'm sure, all of us in so many different ways. But there's what I came to learn, there's actually so many elements of queerness in religious traditions that get written out. And I think part of, I don't want to say fun of it, but part of, I think, what we should be allowed to do and allow ourselves to do is explore that and talk about that. Just in the Old Testament, for instance, you've got stories about King David and Jonathan who were absolutely into each other. There's the book of Ruth. Ruth and Naomi in the Old Testament were also very much, into each other. And there's often kind of the mistranslations and misinterpretations, and then the complete pushing aside of queer stories from what is, I think, belongs to all of us. And I like Lynn's point about the Cajuns and the Catholicism. You can't really separate the culture from the religion. And I think I feel it's true of religion, in my experience of it in general, that there's a culture and there's a religion, and there's a dominant heterosexual culture and dominant heterosexual religion, and those two things just make it so much harder to find any queer spaces inside religion. But there's actually an awful lot there if we were to look. And just to finish this point, that the main character in my sci-fi series is a guy called Alice, and he was raised in a I would say typical heterocentric religion. It was all about family and procreation, and growing up he didn't really relate to that. But then his homeworld, where his religion is based, is destroyed, and he is essentially the last surviving person of his faith, of his race, of his people. And he keeps one religious tradition with him, this nightly prayer in his native language that he was growing up saying every single night. And as kind of time goes on for Alice, and he finds himself in all sorts of weird and wonderful situations, he keeps the prayer with him and he keeps saying it, even though he doesn't understand its meaning, and feels like it's meaningless now that his whole religion is gone. And he actually starts to subtly change it, and he's essentially the last surviving person of his faith, and he has the decision to kind of either keep it going or let it die, and he decides to change it in a way that works for him. And I think we as religion belongs to all of us, and I think so many times people just want to say, no, it belongs to the people who think they know about it, but actually it belongs to, I believe all religions belong to anyone who wants to be involved in that, and particularly queer people. And if we want to be part of something, want to go into it, then there are lots of things, I think, in a lot of religions for us, and it's our right and our absolutely our right to queer the bits of it that we want to make queer, and to engage with what we want from it. If that answers a whole bunch of questions.
Olivia, do you want to chime in?
With the original question, I have not gotten any blowback on my use of religion. I don't know, I make up religions basically, and sometimes they're kind of heavily somewhat based on like real religions, but then also they're different. So it's not like I am bringing in Christianity or Buddhism or anything into my books. Sometimes I just have eldritch horrors. No one seems to mind that.
That sounds about right. What about the thing about the traumatized groups? Do you engage in that in your writing, anything like that? And do you try to redeem their faith or have them move away from? Or do they have any like epiphanies?
So my first book, God Cursed, does fit into that, where the character is in this world that is dominated by a very homophobic religion, and because of that, and he's a very devout person, and like religion has like saved his life and gave him a home when he like otherwise would have been out on the streets. Like he has to kind of like figure out that, yeah, like his desires are okay, like his identity is okay, but he kind of does that in a very like only if you drag me there with over my dead body kind of way. It's not really the best of that kind of representation.
Okay. Rory, did you have an
Yeah.
answer for this one?
I have not yet dealt specifically with that subject, mostly because it strikes a little close to home. My beloved went through that experience, and I feel sure I'm going to work it into my own writing somewhere, because
So basically,
it's a hugely important subject to me. But
yeah, but basically too soon for you.
yes,
It's still too tender.
yes.
Yeah, I can understand that. I can understand that. Yeah, I had, you know, in Edward Unconditionally, where he goes to church, he's terrified to go to church because he's afraid everyone will know that he's gay, and he just sees himself being chased from the church. And it's a completely different experience for him, which kind of shocks him. But I think that, you know, addressing it, especially if you're world building and that's included in your world, that at some point you have to like address whether or not your characters are in it or out of it or in the middle of it, you know. So, okay, so who's doing the questions again? Next. It's one for me. It's really interested in the Catholic milieu. You're writing the priests are okay with characters being werewolves, or the werewolf characters queer. Yeah, in the first book, Bayou Dreams, it's a sort of gay for you book, but the guy's werewolf finds his partner, his mate, who happens to be male. This guy has always considered himself straight. And so now his wolf wants a gay man. And, you know, the motto of my books is the wolf wants what the wolf wants. So this is the whole sort of introduction into this very small pack of queer characters, of gay men who are now becoming visible where they weren't before. And because this one guy stands up, who happens to be alpha, and says, hey, I've got a gay mate, I guess that makes me gay, you know, I didn't know about this, but this is the way it is, gives other people in the pack the support to stand up also and say, hey, I'm gay too. As far as the church, you know, gee, they're dealing with werewolves. So to have a gay werewolf is just another one of those things, and they roll with it. It's usually, there's one priest, and they are pretty much defer to the pack. The pack runs the whole place. So, and the pack, everybody in the pack is very deferential to the church. That's what they grew up in. So yeah, so that's that. Since I'm here. Okay, everybody, what aspects of religion do you use to help frame your narrative? Rory?
Well, speaking from the perspective of wolf becoming, if you take a look at my Twitter, the definition of my favorite genre to write in, I think Harry and I have something in common. I characterize myself as a writer of mythic and legendary fantasy. I tend to see myth and legend, and treating myth very broadly to include religious texts. I see those as the foundation stories of our collective experience. And I think that rewriting them, playing with them, queering them is incredibly powerful, because that is the way that you make change happen in a collective consciousness, as opposed to writing laws, and that's necessary too. But the way you change the collective consciousness is through changing those foundational stories and opening them up. So I guess I would, in answer to that question, I would say any aspect of religion is fair game. Whether it's pointing out the queer aspects that are already there, or someday I'm going to write Adam and Steve.
And queer Jesus as well. We need all of them.
Well, okay, I'm claiming that one. I'm asexual myself. I'm claiming Jesus for the aces. But anybody else is free to do whatever take they want to. But yes.
I want to just agree with Rory, like to add to Rory's point earlier. I definitely think queer retellings or queering is certainly my favorite device, and I think you're absolutely right. It's how we change things by putting those spins on those foundations. I want to plug one of my favorite books I've ever read. It's called Pyrus by Mark Merlis. I think it kind of went in and out of print, and it's also under another name called An Arrow's Flight, I think. But it's basically a queer retelling of the story of Pyrus, who was the son of Achilles. And he had to go to Troy to finish the Trojan War. And then in this book, Pyrus by Mark Merlis, Pyrus is basically a gay hustler when he's working in a strip club, when he's taken in by Odysseus and sent to I think it's Lemnos or somewhere Greek island to get the bow of Heracles from another Greek guy to then go to Troy and finish the war. So basically, it's whatever the real story is of Pyrus and Odysseus. And Mark Merlis takes that story and turns it into this sort of late 70s kind of Lower East Side New York Fire Island type gay fantasia, I guess is the right word for it. It's really fascinating way of taking something that it's very known part of Greek mythology, and taking it and turning it into something that really speaks to kind of that one element of the queer experience quite directly, because he sets it in the late 70s. So there's this kind of sense of the impending AIDS epidemic kind of swirling around the myths. And I think in the original myth, Philoctetes, or I'm sorry if I say the name, but he's dying from a snake bite. So in this story, he's basically dying from undiagnosed AIDS, and it's really, really powerful and fascinating way of taking that and making it relevant to the queer experience. And one more thing to plug, obviously, one more thing I love to plug all the time is Angels in America. It's sure years ago we watched it or we saw it, or I always revisit the actual kind of text of the play as often as I can, particularly when I'm about to start a new project, because the way they just weave in all these different religious elements into kind of into the issues that gay people are facing or queer people are facing, because I think we face the same if not more issues than everyone else, and other people get to use religion or their religious traditions to figure out those issues. So I think by retelling the stories for queer people or with queer elements, it helps them and us figure out how to get through life with these things in our back.
Olivia? Not hearing Olivia.
Not-
There we go.
What was that one?
Yeah. Do you want to speak on the aspects of religion?
Aspects of religion that helped me frame my narrative. Well, this one started because the Eldritch Horror, they need to bring the Eldritch Horror God back in the flesh so that they don't starve to death. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Who wants to take the next? The next question is from Scott. Get out your crystal balls. How will religion be different in 100 years?
I'm going to be pessimistic, and I think in 100 years it's going to be absolutely the same, if not worse in certain aspects. But I think maybe in 1,000 years, or in 10,000 years, or I think religions move in millenniums, not in decades. That's my feeling. And we can't. It's not like the next pope might end up being, well, the next pope might be gay. I'm sure a lot of them were or are or whatever, but I don't think we're going to see a kind of sea change coming from the top. I think for religion, the sea change will come from the people who make up the religion, deciding what's for them or not for them. And I think we can see, if anyone's started watching the new season of Queer Eye on Netflix, the very first episode is just this beautiful story about I think he's an Episcopalian priest, a gay Episcopalian priest. And you think about 100 years ago, that wouldn't have been something they would talk about, and even maybe 20 years ago. So, but as small, individuals making a difference within their part of the religion. And I think that's what we all have to keep doing in order to make progress. But so it's really incumbent on us. If we want religion to change, I think we have to change it. I don't think we can expect anything coming from above.
Olivia, do you have anything to add?
I don't know what religion's gonna look like in the next 100 years. I'm not a sci-fi author.
Well, what would you hope it would look like? What would you hope it looks like?
I hope that it's a lot more accepting of people and a lot less like being obsessed on the state of other people's souls.
Okay, Rory?
Well, I can only speak to Christianity from experience, and I think we're in the middle of that sea change right now. There is a huge movement in the Episcopal Church, and I think in other denominations as well, to cut through the hierarchy, cut through the way we're putting it in the Episcopal Church is decoupling the church from the empire. Worst thing that ever happened to Christianity, one of the worst things that ever happened to Christianity, was being made the state religion. And we're trying to get back to that original church, which does without the hierarchy, does without the addiction to secular power, and is concerned with what we in the Episcopal Church call the beloved community, which was also a phrase popularized by Martin Luther King Jr. A society where everyone is valued for who they are. And I see that change coming. That's not even 100 years from now. That's happening right now, and it's really, really exciting.
Okay, we have another question about the religion as a source of hope or a source of oppression, or does it matter in the story? and let's make this our last question. We're running out of time. Olivia, you're looking very pensive on that. I keep calling you and you keep going, oh no, she's calling my name.
I know in the last panel that I was on, I was like, no, the first question, it's too hard. How do you do character arcs? So I get, but like this is kind of up my alley because I have been using religion more as a source of oppression, which comes out in the story. But I'm really pivoting, like in this past couple years, to using it like as a source of hope and like as a place, and like understanding that like, yeah, a religion might be complicated and there might be some people in that organized religion that denounce you for being whatever, but that like what matters is like that it helps, that your faith helps you, and you might understand that religion in a completely different manner than like some assholes.
Right. So like moving religion more to a personal space between the person, the character, and God, and not a church. So is that what kind of what you're getting at? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that also, and because I think in 100 years, I think we're already seeing a decline in people going to church, in people being ruled by organized religion. And I think we're seeing people moving away from that. And I think we're going to have to see some real change in churches in order to keep their base. So I think if organized religion has any hope to change, to keep their followers, they're going to have to become a lot more open because people are moving away. And it's not just people who are queer moving away. It's people who won't any longer abide by that sort of hatred in a religion. So I'm hoping in 100 years we're going to see just either no religion or a much, much more open and accepting of the organization of religion. Does that make sense? So I'm a little bit more hopeful. Yeah. So let's see, we're at 45 minutes, so we have just a little bit more time. Was there another question we didn't answer? I don't think
I don't mind to give a quick thought on that source question. I think it's really a really great question because I think to me it's not so it's a source either of oppression or of hope. It can be it depends on, you know, it's almost how are the people using it? Are they using it to oppress? Are they using it to give hope? But I think more than that is religion is relevant in terms of our world building. You know, I've read stories like sci-fi and speculative fiction stories that they don't address or touch on or discuss any religious or cultural or mythical aspects inside that world. And to me, that's very hard to engage with because it feels like there's something missing. Because I think above all, religion, whether we like it or not, is still a very, very relevant factor in just in the world we live in. And I think for us to relate to speculative fiction and to kind of really find richness in a world that we are reading about, I think there has to be something in it, discussion, or you know, people are against it or for it. But I think I guess my parting message to all the writers out there is I don't think you can afford to leave it out, whether it's whatever it is, good, bad, oppressive, hopeful. It has to have there's something as part of the world, and I think it needs to kind of be in side stories somehow.
I also think it just depends on the story, and I think it depends on the characters. I have stories where there's no religion at all. I think it depends on what you're trying to tell and the characters and where they are. And a lot of times it's just not applicable, and a lot of times it absolutely is. And I think you just have to figure out what you're writing and the story you want to tell, and what are the things you want to hit on that affect your characters' lives. I think we're about done. I think we've answered all the questions. Does Rory, Olivia, do you have anything that you'd like to say at the very end? Any books that you'd like to say, buy my book? Come on, Olivia. Which, hold it up and show us.
I write books. Yeah.
Buy my book. Yeah, go out to the Rainbow Magic site, and I think we're all out there, and we have links to all our books. Not all our books, but our books, and support authors. And if you've read the books, make reviews. That's always a good thing too. Rory, what do you have? Wolf Becoming, is that the one?
Wolf Becoming is out of print.
Because somebody was
Backdoor-
asking if that was
Backdoor into Purgatory is the last book in the Soul Shares series. If you go to my Amazon page or my search me on, my publisher is Riverdale Avenue Books, and they have everything available in all formats.
Great. All right.
I miss cons though, because I used to be able to sell people the paperbacks for a really steep discount.
I know.
I miss
We
in-person
may not
cons.
see those days for a while.
Yeah.
I think we're being told to finish it up. So thanks for my panelists. I really enjoyed this. Y'all did a great job. Thank you, thank you. And I think Angel's gonna like take over now and tell us. If you missed this, it will be recorded. So at some point they're going to release the recordings of all the panels. So if you came in late, you can watch again at some point. Well, that's it, I think. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you later. If anybody check your schedules, see if any of your favorites are again. I'm not going to be on again, but please stay watching and make sure that you watch tomorrow too. Thank you. Bye-bye.